let a man so account of us as of the ministry of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. That is 1 Corinthians 4, 1 through 2. Welcome back to another episode of Thinking Well Podcast. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Tom.
What's up, Tom?
What's up, Kyle? It's been 2 weeks.
Yes, which I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to announce that. If you haven't noticed, we're on a 2-week schedule now. So instead of every Friday, every other Friday, we'll have a new installment of Thinking Well. And really, we just wanted to take a step back and just make sure that we had ample time to prepare really for every episode. And we think it'll be more excellent that way.
Absolutely.
I think so. Well, I want to get right into it. It's January. If you're a member of Lakewood Baptist Church, you already know this, but it's Stewardship Month. For every month for about 40 plus years in our church, we designate January as the month that we dive into our finances, dive into what God tells us about how to manage our money, how to be stewards of our funds. So that's what we're going to talk about. But we do have two guests with us. We have the associate pastor and head pastor of Lakewood Baptist Church, Daniel Coffman, and Zachary Hatton.
Hello,
everybody.
What's going on?
Always so official. I have to say this every time when you use their full names. It's like they're here.
Zachary Hatton.
Daniel and Zachary.
In the office today.
And I think with this appearance makes it our most frequent guest.
Yeah, for sure.
The three-timer club.
the three. I was kept trying to remember how many times we'd.
Oh, mine's 4, I think, isn't it?
Well, together.
Zach is better.
Together, it's 3.
Yeah, I think I'm one times better
Zach,
than you.
Yeah, he does have one on you.
One, you're one time, one time better than.
Yeah. One more, you get a jacket.
Right.
Oh, nice. Make it happen, Cap.
But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, we heard a message about it today. We always have an afternoon service as well where we dive into more practical finances, but definitely wanted to jump into this as more of a discussional topic. It's definitely something that I think an overwhelming percentage of Christians and just people in general struggle with.
Yeah, and not just the monetary side of it. I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about it throughout the episode, but some of us would find it easier to get on board with, well, I gave God the 10%. That's what he requires of me as a steward. I've done my part, and then now I'm going to move on with my life because I don't have anything that I have to be a good steward of. And I mean, some people may struggle with that, and some people may struggle with that at certain points in their life. I know I have. But there's different forms of stewardship that we need to take as well if we look at the fact that everything we have is God's. And I thought Terry, who does our Terry Leeper, who's one of our deacons and also does the afternoon financial portion for us, made a really good point of that last week when he was like, it's not just we're going to talk about finances, but finances is just a small portion of our stewardship. We're responsible. Everything we have, our talents, our family, our kids, everything comes from God. We're just here he's given it to us to manage for him. Which I thought he did a really good job of pointing out last week. And I think if we can kind of get more in that mindset and focus of, while our finances are maybe something that a lot of people struggle with, I almost think sometimes we struggle with even more, like, well, then my time, I'm also have to be a steward of my time because all the time that I've been given is given to me by God as well. Am I stewarding that well? And I thought that the verse that we opened with was really key. That last portion of verse 1 where it says, "And stewards of the mysteries of God," I thought was like, whoa, we're stewards of the mysteries of God. And Paul does go into some explanation that when you look at Colossians 1, where he explains that the mystery has been revealed in us, right? That Christ in you, the hope of glory. And if we approach that as stewards, are we being good stewards of the hope of glory that we've been given in every facet of our lives? that was kind of where my thought process went on this topic for this week. Not just focusing so much on the financial aspect of it, but are we faithful to be good stewards in all of the facets that we've been given? Gentlemen, what say you?
Thoughts? Yeah, the Christian worldview is one where, I would challenge somebody to find another worldview with as much potential and purpose as the Christian worldview. God gives us potential and purpose in everything that we do, and all the relationships what we have with what we have, and it's kind of like this. It's just like God gives, so you come at it with that approach: life, time, resources, and just in a joyful, as a father to a child, a father to a son, to a daughter. He says, make it better. I'm giving you this, and make it better. And that's a pretty optimistic approach. That gives a lot of glimmer to life. It gives a lot of hope to life. When everything is a gift, and then also an encouraging gift that you have control over, it's not some burden. Man, it's an opportunity, and a great opportunity. And I know this is outside the purview, but I just for the sake of me talking about it, just like find that in atheism. Mm-hmm. Find that in Kantism. Find that in nihilism. Doesn't exist. There you're just struggling, you're striving just to strive. Who's that guy that rolled the stone up the hill just ad nauseum? It escapes me. Sisyphus. Yeah, you're just like Sisyphus, rolling a big fat stone up that for no reason. Well, God gives you a reason.
Yeah,
it's like He make it better and do it for my glory, and in that way, it magnifies His glory, and that's what I love about the subject of stewardship.
Yeah, I like your thought on it too, Tom. That a lot of times in stewardship, we focus primarily on finances. And I think that's true because finances are probably the truest measure of where our heart is.
Sounds like you heard a sermon on that.
Yeah, I've also read the Bible once. But it really is true that what we love, we tend to throw money at it, and whether that's like pursuing a relationship or whatever, we tend to do that, and so. I think that's the easy target for stewardship. I also think there's no better way to talk about money and finances than to talk about them in terms of stewardship.
Right.
But to your point, like God hasn't given us just money. It's not original to me, but three groups of time, talent, and treasure. He gives us time that we have to redeem for the glory of God. He gives us money that we should be redeeming for the glory of God. And He gives us natural ability. You guys are here because you know how to talk. You have some skills with recording and digital asset management. And so you are stewarding that for God's glory. And that's great. One of the things that we talked about last week when I preached, I know I didn't get quoted yet for having taught during Stewardship Month.
It's coming.
Okay, good. Yeah, just remember that. But we spoke out of 1 Chronicles 29 where David is praying and he says, both riches and honor come of thee. It's like whatever I make and whatever is made out of my life, it all comes from God. That is, to say that everything we have in our lives and everything we become in our lives is because of the touch of the hand of God on our lives. And to live every day in an awareness of God's goodness in your life is really, like, to me, that's kind of the essence of stewardship, is that God has blessed us immensely with things that are His. And how are we using those, maximizing those for His glory? Stewardship is a weird word, but it's a pretty simple concept. It's a Bible word, and we don't all have so much stuff that we need to hire a steward to take care of it for us. But the concept of understanding that that everything is God's and we're responsible for how we take care of it it's pretty simple to understand.
Yeah, the reason we focus, to your question, and we talked about it encompassing everything, but the reason we talk about money really, like in stewardship, like on Sunday morning services, Sunday afternoon, and that's when we get to practical finance. But it's because a lot of Christians, it's probably twofold, maybe threefold. Sinners, makes things super hard. Ignorance, not a lot of people know about it. And then mismanagement, sometimes we're just plain bad at it.
Yeah.
And we got to be able to fit God into that equation. And the reason you need to jar people out of their way of thinking, because we really do this. We think in like, this is my money. This is my paycheck. It's mine. You're like those seagulls on Finding Nemo. You know.
Yeah, mine.
Yeah,
mine,
there it is.
mine.
Deep cut reference right there.
That's right. And so it's like shaking somebody out of that, and then getting to think beyond, their overpriced coffee purchases. And look, I almost did that today before I came up here. If I had time, you better believe I would have had something in my hand after a Sunday. But your overpriced coffee, like we make time and make purchases for us and everything else, and then it kind of just edges God out of the whole picture. And we say we talk about tithe, but like quite honestly, you think about the culture of our congregation. Wow, there's a lot of new Christians in there. Mm-hmm. And they don't know about tithing. They don't know the difference between tithing and offering, or tithing and offering, and what we talked about today, faith, promise, missions, giving. And so we're making all of these purchases and doing all of these things, and really God's work is sidelined and hampered both by ignorance. We don't know that this is how God finances work, and then we're just really bad managers sometimes. And unless you talk in these hard, fast terms, I mean, you guys get it. You've been a part of this church, what 20 years? How long has it been for you, Tom?
4, 5 maybe. I think it was going on 5.
Okay, 4 or 5. And then Kyle, all your life, literally.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And so it's like almost second nature. But I'll tell you this, that is not second nature for a lot of churches. Not second nature for a lot of Christians. They have no clue. Right. But far be it from me to allow that to happen inside of our congregation. The reason why we're able to make such good progress, by the way, as a church like the size of ours, because I don't know, Dan, would we be a mid-size or a small church on statistics? Is mid-size?
We're probably mid-size. The average church in America is about 80, so we're we're mid.
Yeah, so we're a little over mid-size, and I would be really surprised if there was, the average church is able to do the kinds of things that we're able to do and accomplish the kind of financial things that we're able to accomplish, because everybody's on board. Average church gives about 20%. Their congregation gives, so 20% of the whole congregation shoulders the primary burden of that congregation, and that goes for salaries and programs. 20%. We are well over that. Obviously, we would like everybody on board. I'm not going to force people to do anything. I'm not going to be like, peering into people's bank accounts and be like, what are you doing? That's not my style. I want it to be God. This is not a guilt trip show. But I will say, because we talk about it every year, since everybody's on the same page, we're able to bring in a significant amount of money and do all kinds of projects all around the world. And I think that is amazing, but is because we're intentional about it. And if you're listening to this and you're a pastor, wow, you probably need to implement it and like give your congregation like a 10-question test about it, and just you'll cry probably at the answers. I just refuse to do that, because it not only robs, God, it not only robs the church of people of the opportunity to give, but it robs you of opportunities just in general. Like, you're not able to function. You're not able to take care of things. Like, how much money would you say we spent on like air conditioners and whatever just in the last year? This wasn't a bad year. This wasn't a bad summer, but there was something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've probably spent $5,000 on ACs.
And we just had that at the drop of a hat.
Right. The year before that, it was 15.
15. Yeah. And we paid that in cash just because we had it on hand. That's amazing, but that's stewardship. So that's why we talk about it every year.
Well, and I don't think it. I think it's not only beneficial. Well, I know that it's not only beneficial for newer Christians who haven't heard these concepts before, but for what we would consider seasoned Christians as well, right?
Right.
Like,
sure.
This is a time of year that I both look forward to and am apprehensive about, because I know that I'm about to come under some pretty heavy conviction in my life, right? So it's not something that like just young Christians don't understand the concept of. It's something that I guess I would be considered a seasoned Christian. I guess
You're pretty seasoned.
I guess I have to accept that.
Yes.
I'm probably the oldest
beard
guy in the room.
and your beard hair.
But it's something that I do fail at. It's something that I do struggle with. It's something that where I might be at the opposite end of how I started talking about stewardship, where I find it easy to give my time and everything else. But when it gets to the financial portion of it, that's where I seem to struggle more, right? Yeah. So where you might have a group of Christians who are at one end of the spectrum where the financial portion of it is just like, oh yeah, what? No, that's not an issue. Like, sure, let's go. And at the other end of the spectrum, there are people who are potentially more like me, where it's like, what, time? Like, I don't need time for myself. I'll give every spare moment of time that I have to God. But it's not just being faithful in one thing or the other. It's being faithful in all of it, which is why I've found these beginning of the year just series on stewardship to be very beneficial for me, because it helps kind of, oh, wow, the Holy Spirit just works on me pretty hard. I'm not going to lie. So,
well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what some people reconcile. Mm-hmm. They'll say, well, I don't tithe or I don't give per se, but man, I give a lot of my time, or I'm in a band, the worship band, or I'm in, whatever ministry. So I give that way. No, right. No. You've missed the point of stewardship if you're trying to like cut corners on it. And I'll take your argument of I give my time and I'll raise you. God wants everything. Yeah,
but it's all his anyway, right?
That's like, exactly
that's
right.
Us,
yeah,
that's us.
That's it.
And another great point that Terry made is like that's us making. Well, God will use whatever I give Him to His glory. No, God's not supposed to be the steward of the things that we want to give Him.
Correct.
We're to be the stewards of the things that He gave us. It's not, well, I'll give my stuff to God and then He can use it however He wants to. No, He's given things to us and then He's instructed us on how to use those things.
Yeah.
So, it's a great time of year. It's always very refreshing and very, like I said, convicting. Yeah. Just me being honest.
Well, let me ask you, like about today. Was there anything? And it's not I'm almost sounds like I'm fishing. I'm not trying to fish.
Tell me how good I did this morning.
Yeah, tell me how amazing it was. No, like for today though. I mean, like, was there any clarity in regard to like Faith Promise Missions, or is that something already squared away?
So Faith Promise Missions, from my experience, has always been something a little different. Where like I come from a kind of a more of a Baptist culture where people like actually like wrote things down on cards and turned it in, and that was there. And it's like for a lot of that, and I'm not saying if your church does that that's a bad thing to do, but sometimes that comes off sometimes as like posturing, where people are like, well, I committed this much and I committed this much.
Yeah.
Whereas the last few churches I've been in have spoken of faith promise missions, but have specifically said, write something down, but that's between you and God. And I don't need to know about what you wrote down between you and God, but you need to execute on it, because that's your commitment that you're making. And that's how mission work gets done, right?
Right.
The tithe is there to sustain the church, and then offerings are above and beyond that. But then missions giving is something that we have to, by faith, say, the Lord has impressed this upon my heart. I'm going to give this to that work, right? But that, I mean, coming from a missionary family, that's always been something that's been a pretty
you lived
easy,
off of that, didn't you?
been
Yeah,
a pretty
sure.
easy concept for me to comprehend. But again, there's a lot of people who don't understand that concept,
Right.
and that's how mission work gets done. And sure, we can sustain it. I know churches that are like, well, we're going to set 10% of our tithe aside to missions,
Yeah, I've
and
seen
that's
that
how we're going to
before.
get missions done,
Yeah,
right?
10 or
And
15%.
that's fine
Yeah.
too. I mean, however your church does it, but giving to missions has to get done, because, and I do like the point that's been made multiple times here by you and others, Zach, is like somebody had a mind for missions
Yeah.
originally in order
Absolutely.
for this church to get established. And 100 years from now, 86 years from now, right, there's going to be another church that may potentially be able to say that. And Lake Worth was one of the contributors to it.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. That would make my world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point, how many churches now can say that on a foreign field or here locally in the United States, that we've been instrumental as a church over the last, when we started, right? 86, 87 years, right? This year we 86? Am I right on that?
87.
87, okay.
87, yeah.
But yeah, 87 years worth of mission support, that there could be churches out there right now that can say that already.
No, I absolutely agree. I think my biggest takeaway from this morning was what happens if we don't,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you mentioned that currently we dip into our general fund to make up that other
Our commitments. Yeah.
commitments, which hey, we will do what we have to do.
That's right.
Right.
That's the commitment. But in a long-term play, how is that sustainable, right? Maybe not, right? And then how many other churches maybe are in the exact same financial situation that we are, that completely is not sustainable for them.
Mm-hmm.
But they still have these commitments. They still have a heart to give. That's my fear. What happens if we don't pick up that slack just across the board? What does that mean? Does that mean that we have to start dropping missionaries?
I'd say God forbid, yeah.
It's not good. But it was good. It was good to hear it. You've taught similar messages, but you're right. Nothing quite as targeted as what you did
Right.
at 11. It was good.
Well, I mean, like it came from a series of discussions from Dan and I. Because like I heard the term, and I didn't disagree with it, but I just committed myself this year to like, I want to know where that comes from. I want to know why we have adopted this language.
Yeah.
And as I dug in, there's a couple of changes that administratively, biblically, I think we should make, and we are. But the term is an accurate term. It's a good term. It's a biblical term, as long as it's rightly understood.
Mm-hmm.
And what's neat about this church is we got a kind of a fresh new opportunity. It wasn't so much, and I hope it didn't feel like this, because I sure didn't mean it to. It wasn't like we're failing. The fact is, like these missionaries that we've taken on, like a lot of them have been taken on by support from our church, from membership that is no longer here. We've got a whole new church body, and they, coming into this church, have kind of adopted this thing that was voted on without them. So it's not a bad thing. It's just like, okay, as a church, we still made this commitment, and so now we have these new church members. and like, this is what we agreed to. Well, let's keep on that track, and like re-up that commitment with these new people that God has given us. And it's just a matter of just leveling the playing field and getting everybody on the same page.
Do you think it's hard, as the preaching staff, right, the head of the church, the church leadership, do you find it difficult to, approach discussions, sermons about the money, the funds? Because I know there's a lot of perception out there where kind of churches get a bad name for it. And, I think, even me and Zach, we've talked about it in the past just regarding like a new building project, right? Where we're never about the numbers.
Right.
We aren't a numbers church and that comes down to dollars and cents and people. But, right, if you add to the church, as we're commanded to do, that is a side product.
Yeah, I would say, and I'll answer for Zach on this since he answered for me before.
Really?
There is a negative perception about preaching on money. That's certainly something that the general church member or maybe just general public kind of sees as a negative thing, and I think that's because there are people who abuse it. Hey, send me your seed money and all of that. Well, obviously we don't believe in that. We don't do that. There is something deeply personal about teaching on finances. And a lot of that's because we're all convicted about not doing it well. I think that's where a lot of that comes from. But is it awkward occasionally? But am I shy about it? No, because it's in the book. We talked about this last week. There's over 2,300 verses in the Bible about wealth and money management. 15% of Jesus' teaching in the New Testament was about your heart on money. What is it, like 11 of the 39 parables that Jesus taught were about wealth, riches, and how you manage your money. So that's like 15% of his teaching. 11% of the parables were about money. And so it's God cares about how you spend your money. And so I should care about teaching about how you use your money in the same way that sin is awkward to talk about too. Right? You want to talk about how like your sin is offensive to God. Well, that's kind of weird too, because sin is deeply personal. But we talk about it because it's in the book, and it's backed up. And so I think as long as what we're doing is backed up by an exposition of Scripture, then there's no reason to be shy about it. And it may be awkward, but there's no reason to be shy about it.
Right. Zach, do you think that, because you mentioned earlier, just a second ago, that the landscape out there for other churches, that you believe that the majority of them are not having these discussions. They aren't having dedicated times of the year to really focus in on stewardship, but primarily on finances. What percentage do you think are out there that are just kind of, do you think there's a majority of churches just aren't having these discussions because they're scared of, loss of membership or offending? What do you think is the reason?
I'll let Dan answer that. He's like, no, I'm just kidding.
I was ready. I was about to go.
I've had the microphone up to my
I'm going to
face.
count to three.
One of the things before you answer, because I'm sure you have a wonderful answer, is I've noticed that every church I've ever been in has no problem talking about missions giving.
Yeah.
But this, what we're talking about right now, the specific stewardship portions of it, like they'll preach on faith promise, they'll preach on giving to missions, but like our responsibility as stewards of what God has given us has been a little remiss. And I don't know that I've necessarily been in more churches than most of the people in the room, but I've been in a few, and there has been just kind of a lack of that teaching on stewardship. So, Zach,
I'll say. I don't know if I've ever been to another church that I've heard a message on it, especially not the way that we do it here.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'll have to give my my system, the wisdom of the system. I've got
Solid
to,
rhyme.
yeah, put that on a t-shirt. I have to give that to my forebears. It was through Brother Jerry Locke, and then partly his dad, but mainly Brother Jerry, that started teaching on this subject well before I came along.
Mm-hmm.
It was 33 and a half years that he was here, and I believe, I wish he was here to correct me, but I believe this is true, that he started it right away. And so there was over 3 decades of stewardship teaching, and I just kind of dovetailed off of that wisdom. It was nothing that I came up with myself. I just saw how it, first of all, changed my life. And then when I became a pastor here, because and that's actually, I didn't mean to get into this, but we were coming here, my wife and I, and then we came on a stewardship month. And Tom, that's exactly what happened. I got a little heart knock on my chest, and God was saying, Zachary, this is you. But that's the thing. If you don't talk about it, you can't be convicted about it.
That's right.
And so my wife and I, and this is a longer story we probably don't have time for, but my wife and I, we were losing money. We had just bought a house. We had just leased 2 cars from D&M Leasing, because, that's what you do when you're young. You do irresponsible things.
But it sounded super cool.
Yeah, it sounds so amazing. And why would they lie to you on a radio program? Why?
Yeah, that's where all the Dallas Cowboys lease their Mercedes.
Exactly. And so we did that, and we had our house, and we had these cars, and she had just graduated from TCU and was making $10 an hour. I was working at a small municipality police department making $14 an hour, mortgage, 2 leased cars. That was not a recipe for success. And man, it was tough, and we were losing money hand over fist. Well, we had, and mainly because Stephanie is a saint, but we had a lot of savings, thank goodness. But we were eating into it, and we came to a stewardship month. Boy, that was, and I looked at tithing like a bill. I was like, I guess God wants a bill too. I guess the government gets it. Taxes get it, from property taxes or whatever. Everybody gets their piece, and I guess this is another bill. It's like paying electricity. My wife and I sat at the kitchen table, and we were like, I guess we're going to do this. We're not. And we did. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I have no idea, because the math wasn't mathin'. Like, the reason why I'm a preacher is because I can't do math. I can't do math at all. It shuts down my brain. But I know how to add and subtract. And we were making it. I was like, I have no idea. This doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And then, fast forward just a little bit, Stephanie got a new job, and then I got a raise, and things started happening, and I was like right after we started tithing, and I was like, this is impossible. This is impossible. Mm-hmm. And then it kept on changing my life, and it kept on. I was like, all right, you got my attention. And so by the time I became a pastor, I was like, there's not a chance in the world we're not going to be talking about this. This will bless your life. I don't know. And actually, that's what, Malachi 3? Mm-hmm. And he proved me now, And God says, test it. It's like the only time that God says, try it, loser, and try it. See if I don't bless you. See if I don't open the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing so large that you can't receive it. To this day, I'm still, I think back in those times, and it nearly drives me down to my knees, because we were drowning financially. But God, right?
Yeah.
But God. And like, I know if somebody starts, it will change your life. Even if you do it kind of for the wrong attitude, like even if you're looking at it and God's just like, I don't care, just trust me, even begrudgingly, just trust me, and it will. God will change your heart about it and won't be begrudging anymore. It will be the most glorious thing that you have ever done. I even forgot what we were talking about. What was the question?
So
yeah, go ahead.
The cool thing about that story is it's a proof of stewardship as well, right?
Sure.
Because when you look at from a business perspective back then, right? Like if you were a good steward, you got more responsibility.
Sure. Yeah.
When you look at the parable of the talents, right? The stewards that were given money and were given a certain amount and performed well with it, they were given more responsibility and more things to be stewards over, right? And I think our concept sometimes is, well, if I'm a good steward, then I'll just keep trudging along being a good steward, and well, God hasn't really blessed me with any more money, or I haven't gotten to a certain point where this is the goal that I set for myself, right? Yeah, but look around. You know, have your one of the stories I love about my grandfather is like he also did, like he got saved, and he got saved later on in life, and he didn't tithe, and one day his pastor preached about tithing, and he was talking to the pastor afterwards about it, and he's like, I just don't get it. And the pastor was like, well, why don't you try it for a year?
Sure.
And then we'll talk about it then. And a year later, my grandpa was like, he's like, I don't make any more. I don't have any more money in savings than I used to.
Amazing.
And the pastor was like, well, hang on though. How many times have your kids been, because my dad was like, used to be in the hospital a lot. And he was like, well, how many times has Ivan and my dad been in the hospital this last year? And my grandpa sat back in the chair at the kitchen table, and he's like, you know what? You're right.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. He's like, how many times has this happened, or how many problems have you had in this area? Like, how many car issues have you had? And we always think of it that God's going to bless us the way that we think He should bless us. And we don't look at all the ways that He's blessing these other facets of our life, because we're so focused on like, well, He hasn't given me any more money.
Right.
Well, but He also hasn't, he's blessed in other portions of your life where the car that was on its last leg 2 years ago, you know, it's still on its last leg somehow. Like it hasn't broke down. It's still running. He's
that's
still
also
being
part of
faithful in it.
Malachi 3.
Yeah.
It's like God says, I will rebuke the devourer. Mm-hmm. In other words, He's like, I'm gonna protect you. All the stuff that would eat, because I'll tell you this: you don't tithe and you know better, God will get it back. Like you're just gonna be
so true.
Yeah, he's gonna get it in your car. He's gonna get it in that dishwasher that broke down. He's gonna get it in the dryer that you need. I mean, you're gonna be like hanging out your laundry on the roof of your house. You know, He's gonna get it back. But God says, so you're right, Tom. It's not like just you know a Fortune 500 company's like, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn and I think you're a great candidate. That's not what it is. It's also the little blessings that don't eat into us. And He says, I will rebuke the devourer. I'll keep your clothes. I'll keep your stuff. And you know, somebody could just offhandedly dismiss that, but God says that's real.
Yeah.
This is what I will do. And that's really how we have to look at it. I think, Kyle, you're the one that asked me the question, right? They're like, what? I think I don't know how to answer that, other than the fact that, like, I see the landscape of just evangelical churches. Let's just use that term because, but a lot of the churches today, you know, 80 and under, and a lot of pastors bivocational, and they stay there. I think a lot of the reason why is because people don't know. People don't know. They're not paying a salary for a pastor, and the pastor's really not able to grow because he's working two jobs, trying to pastor a church and working another job. I think you shoot yourself in the foot spiritually without coaching your people and teaching them biblical principle of stewardship. So there's probably all kinds of things that we could say in there, but that I do know is that the majority of this country is made up of smaller churches. I think, at least under 100 for sure. And with those smaller churches, like we're able to accomplish churches double our size with the staff and what we do. Double our size, easy. But these churches with 100 or less people, and they have a bivocational pastor because they're just limping along because everybody's just so tight-fisted, they don't get it. And so, but I'll tell you this, they won't if you don't talk about it. I think that's probably more the reason why.
I think that's probably true, but a part of my mind goes back, because if we're talking about just stewardship in terms of everything that God's blessed us with, like a part of me thinks that every message you preach is technically a stewardship message. It's God has given you life or opportunity or time. What are you doing with it? And I mean, because stewardship is really, like, while it is not the overarching story of the Bible, it is one of the kind of meta narratives that flow through every story, every narrative
From the very, very beginning.
Yeah, it's God has given you something. What are you doing with it? How are you maximizing what God has given you as gain for His glory? And to Zach's point, to go back to even the very beginning of time, that in the garden, God blessed Adam with a wonderful garden, and the mission that Adam was given was not to now go through and figure out what every one of these things tastes like, right? And what's your favorite? Let me know what your favorite is. Get fat, be happy, just enjoy it, like, lay around. That was not what God told him. God told him that you need to keep and dress it, that you need to protect what I've given you, and you need to make it better. You need to keep cultivating and making it better. And now the not so subtle implication is that Adam would then walk in the cool of the evening with God and say, "Hey God, I've got this idea about this. How do you keep this thing alive? How do we make this better?" And like this communion, this relationship with God that would lead Adam to be a better steward of what God had given them. But that's at the very beginning. But every other passage in the Bible is, technically a stewardship passage. What are you doing with what God has given you? And I think that is the key to preaching. That I'm not trying to say we have some kind of secret sauce, but I think that is a key to preaching, is really the point of application. Right, here's the truth. Now, what are you going to do with it? And then helping people understand how you work that into your life. It makes teaching stewardship on finances all the easier, because that is the teaching style, and our people are accustomed to hearing, a message about what you do with the truth that's set before you. So I think it makes it easier for us. I can't really speak to all of the other churches, because thankfully I don't go to the that's probably a harsh way to say it. Thankfully I don't go to your church. It's kind of a bad way to say that. But thankfully God has blessed me with some stability in my church home. Yeah. And I don't have to go around and see what everybody else is doing. But it can be awkward, but it doesn't have to be. Especially if you consider everything in the Bible an opportunity to talk about stewardship, God's truth, and what you're doing about it.
And I've seen some other churches that we associate with, because I talk this up, and I've seen some other churches pick this up now, and I couldn't be happier for it. At least a Sunday, and maybe not a whole month. I don't know. Just do what as the Spirit leads for your church. But I'm just happy to see more guys talking. A good friend of mine I just saw last week posted a really, I might steal it, his sermon. I don't know. But for real, I mean, he had committed to preaching more on giving and tithing, and he started, and he used the beginning of the year. It's just a good time to kind of put a spiritual reset on that topic. Yeah.
I know I sent out like some points earlier, but to Dan's comment on kind of how the meta narrative in the Bible is just good stewardship. I think that might be one of the things that for me has made it a lot easier throughout the month of January as we're in stewardship month to talk about those things and be receptive to those things, because the points that I had sent out earlier was know the owner, right? When we talk about stewardship, recognize our role, point to Christ, invest what we've been given, and be willing to let go. If you were to come into this church, you'll hear those points in just about every message that you hear preached, right? We make it a point here at Lake Worth to know who the owner of our things are and who we should be giving credit to the things that we have, that we are a part of that plan.
Right.
And just so many, that everything that we do points to Christ, right? Like to know Jesus and make him known is kind of our motto here at the church. And when you look at all that is what stewardship is about. And Kyle and I were talking a little bit before everybody got up here about the be willing to let go. For me, that's like that's a key thing. Like if I'm not willing to let go of something that God has given me, then I'm making it mine. Like I'm not making it his anymore, right? And then I'm no longer being a steward of it. I'm like, well, this is mine. This is something that, this is just mine. God didn't have any. I got this for myself, and so then I'm not willing to let it go. Well, then I'm not really being a steward. Anything I do should be willing to let go of if God calls me to that.
I've let people borrow books like that. I said, you can borrow this for a time.
Yeah, that's
somehow it's become theirs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, pastors and their dwindling libraries.
It is. Well, I call mine a living library because I give out a lot of books. But yeah, there's a quote by Corrie ten Boom that I absolutely love. And she said, learn to hold on to everything loosely. Mm-hmm. That way it doesn't hurt as much when God pries it out of my hands. Mm-hmm. She said that about her sister who was killed in a concentration camp. And she had prayed that her sister not be taken, and she was. And Corrie survived, and her sister did not. And I remember Chuck Swindoll told a story. She, at her latter days, attended the church that he was pastoring. And she came to shake his hand after the sermon, and his kids were still small. And she said that line to him. She said, hold on to them loosely. Hold on to them loosely. He said, I saw her face. And you could see the pain of losing her sister in her eyes. And really, really sobering thought. And that's where we're talking about circumstances today as well. They can change. They can change. Is it God's right? Is it God's prerogative? Maybe it's not rich in finances. Maybe it's rich in faith in the middle of trial and affliction. Is it possible? Oh, it is. It's very possible. And we need to be mindful of that. Is it really God's? Because if you haven't reconciled that in your mind, it will hurt a lot. And it has. It's derailed a lot of people in their faith, hasn't it?
Yeah.
God didn't do this for me. God didn't do that for me. And we didn't realize that our life was His, and realize, what it means to live in a sin-cursed world with sinful people and selfish tendencies. and things get ripped apart, what do you have left? Well, stewardship says you still have your relationship with God. Stewardship says you still have an ability to pray. Stewardship says you still have spiritual treasure. Stewardship says you still have your emotional control and a good testimony that you can live out in the middle of bad circumstances. God didn't promise you circumstances. He promised to be your God forever, to be with you through it all. And if you make stewardship just about getting, you've missed the point.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that that stewardship was unnatural to new Christians. I was thinking about that as you were talking. It's unnatural to people. It's unnatural to like the American dream, right?
Right.
We're taught to just to get and to retain, to buy and sell and get gain and continue to grow this nest egg that we have, and to some degree, planning for your retirement is a great part of stewardship. That you are using what God has given you to relieve the burden of your family and friends for a time when you can't work. That is proper stewardship. But if we're never willing to give away what isn't ours, then to Zach's point, we're missing the point of stewardship. I wrote a line for last week's sermon that I didn't read over, and so you're welcome to take it for next week's sermon on generosity. But
Okay.
and it's not quite as it's not
Less
as
work that I have to do.
like 6 words that you don't have to. It's not as probably potent or moving as Corey Ten Boom, but I wrote that open wallets can give just as easy as they receive, and it was it's very Ten Boom of me, right? Because but open wallets, open hands. I mean, you can give just as easy as God can give back to you, and that's part of God's supernatural economy. I like you mentioned earlier. I can't explain it, and luckily I don't have to explain all of the ins and outs of it. But this kind of supernatural way that God says, "Hey, which is a wonderful." I think that's like the final element, or one of the final elements of stewardship is that God, for whatever reason, chooses to reward you for doing what He asks you to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
What is reasonable for you to
Right.
do?
Well, that's kind of the logic I was thinking of while studying for this is, how many stories, and this may have happened personally to you, where, as you were saying, Zach, hey, me and my wife, we're getting down to it, and we're dipping into savings, and the math doesn't check out, right? How many times does He still provide, right? Where,
Yeah.
I think my parents have a story like this where they have a story where they just heard a knock on the door one day, and it was someone saying, "Hey, I just felt led to give this to you," and it's just thousands.
I remember that day.
Thousands of dollars. Just here we go, right when you needed it. But going on to what you were saying, Dan, if we as Christians can understand that it's not ours to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
right? But we are in charge of keeping it secure and growing and keeping it safe, right? But if we aren't willing to let go of it, what are we saying to God, right? And I think we're saying that, this is mine. My pride, I'm stealing this away from you, God. This is now mine.
Thank you for what I deserve.
Right, which you don't.
Which is nothing.
Right. But the other side of it is, and I think you just said it, Dan, right? That He is so just and such a good God that He rewards us for giving things back to Him like they're His.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mhm.
you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
he gives
Yeah.
you, let's just say money. Let's say He gives you funds. You tithe, you give offerings, hope, the promised missions, you're doing everything, right? And He richly blesses your life, let's just say with more money, right? It's all His money anyway, right? You've given back, you've given back to the church, you've given back to the ministries the church is involved in, but He still lets you keep what is even His still.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like either way, right?
Yeah, that was another great thing from the story in First Chronicles 29 from last week. That very quotable message that I'm still upset we haven't quoted yet. But David is at the end of his life, and he's devoted the end of his life to amassing this treasure for the nation, for the temple.
Right.
Yet, even though he's done all that, he still goes above and beyond of his own personal store. And he gives this wonderful prayer where he lets people understand, or really he's just talking to God and really exposes some truths about stewardship. But one of the things that he says in verse 14 of chapter 29 is, "But who am I, and what is thy people, that we should be able to offer so willingly after this sort? For all things come of thee, and of thine own have we given thee." We're just giving back to you your stuff. Like, why is that such a blessed position? But for whatever reason, God says, you know what, you've done what I've asked you to do, and there's reward for that. And honestly, that is, I think that just speaks to the graciousness of God. And that's exactly what will happen, at the end of our lives. Like we've lived these, troubled, stained lives, but God has allowed us to partner with him in ministry. And even though we are sorry and fail, God still says, but you did some good stuff, and I'm going to reward you for that. And it's just like, what? Why me? Really? I know me.
You already gave us salvation, and you still want to reward us beyond that? Like,
right.
what?
And that's one of the great things about, I think it's one of my biggest motivations about serving the Lord with my time, really, like being a good steward, is that, there's a great scene in Revelation where after God rewards us for things that we did that he told us to do that really deserve no reward.
Right.
It's kind of like when you go to the fast food restaurant and they ask for a tip and you're like, what? Like, why is this now a tip? Like, you're just doing what I've asked you to do. You put something in a microwave, gave it back to me. I'm not giving you a tip for that. But in God's economy, we get a tip for that. We do what God has asked us to do with the things that he has given us, with the time and the life that he has given us and graciously blessed us with. And yet at the end, even in this life rewards us, but yet at the end rewards us even more for just doing what he asked. But there's a great scene where we're able then one final time to take all that he has given us and cast it at his feet.
Finally point it in the right direction.
Yeah. And it's because he's worthy.
Right.
And I just, to be honest, I can't wait for that day. And I want to live my life in a way that I've got something to give back. I don't want to be empty-handed in that scene. That would be a waste. But certainly God is gracious to give us, something. But I want that to be as much as possible, to say that I truly have maximized my time in my life, not for my own good, not because I'm going to stack crowns, 13, 14 high on this head, although this head could fit 14 crowns. We know that. But that I'll have all of that to give back to Jesus, who's worthy of it all. I got distracted there for a second thinking about heaven.
Healthy.
But
Fair.
Yeah, the end of stewardship.
Yeah.
But what a wonderful thing.
Sure.
The graciousness of God.
Well, look at that. We went from Genesis all the way through to Revelation. Stewardship.
I think that means we're good stewards of this time together.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
That we've stewarded the mysteries of God well.
I think so.
In explaining.
Well, I did also want to kind of give a plug for that afternoon service that Brother Terry provides. It's more of a practical look on finances. We'll take a look at budgeting, the order of, how to invest, where do you put it for prosperity, right, within your bank accounts and things like that. But, if anyone's listening to this and, it's something I still struggle with. I think you're only human if you struggle with giving your finances to the Lord, right? That's just part of it. If that's something you struggle with and you need answers and you need help, we would love to minister to you. We'd love to answer your questions. We'd love to talk to you about it. And here's your invitation. We'd love to have you here on a Sunday afternoon in January, 1:30 on a Sunday afternoon, we'd love to help in any way we can, and just minister to you. Seriously.
If you can't make it to those, they are online. So we do stream our 1:30 service to Facebook. And so you can see all those videos online at Facebook. It's always good material. So, if you were looking for the super course, the master class, you could go back 3 or 4 years and take all of those classes. But wonderful practical information about staying out of debt. And then once you're out of debt, what do you do with the money that you have in your bank account?
Right. And I think was it the 5th year?
I don't remember.
4th or 5th year, I think.
It is, yeah.
That he's been doing this. I mean, he's by all means a financial expert in the space, but so we know it'll be beneficial to you. But yeah, like Dan said, if you can't make it here on a Sunday, we have that digitally for you. If you'd like that, if you need that directly sent to you, let us know. We'd love to engage with you.
You can get a hold of us at podcast@lakeworthbaptist.org. You can reach out to us on social media at LWBC_publications on both Facebook and Instagram. If you like the podcast, we would appreciate it if you would follow and share. We just love to be in more people's lives and share some truth and hopefully just be a blessing. It's a blessing to us every week, every other week now when we have people that comment to us that they've listened and that they've enjoyed it. It's a blessing to us. It actually does let us know that we're being good stewards of the time and resources we've been given. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anything else to add, gentlemen, before we end?
Before God wants any of your resources, he wants your heart.
All right.
That's all.
Amen. So be it. Well, as Tom said, we're on a bi-weekly schedule, so we'll see you in 2 weeks. In the meantime, have a blessed 2 weeks. Stay safe. Stay warm. It's cold out there today. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you, everybody.